Today on Spotlight Now, we get reaction from the last legislative session from members of the progressive left and right.
Plus, one of those members has some big news about his political future. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. We had a little shift in programming. The governor, who was originally scheduled to join us here today, had to take a trip to Washington, D.C., and so we do have a different show planned out today. But as always, we like to engage you, the viewing audience, in the conversation. Make sure to head over to Facebook and enter your question for our guests in the comments section.
And we have some exciting guests today. Colin Moore will be back with some political analysts to talk about what our first two guests are going to be talking about. Representative Coco Iwamoto will be here, but we lead off today with Senator Brenton Awa. Senator, thanks for being here.
Oh, the pleasure is mine, I guess. It's been a while since I've been at the desk with you folks.
It has. You know, full disclosure, we all worked together a lifetime ago in television, and now we get to interview you. It's a different dynamic, but I want to lead off with that little tease that I gave at the top, and that is some political news for your future. Tell us a little bit about what you've been looking at.
Yeah, I know. Well, right now we've been looking at the today and what we can do in our community. And I know you want to get to the nugget here, but I would want to make that clear. We are focused on the projects we have in our communities from Kaneohe out to the North Shore and up to Kunia. That's been our focus since we ended the legislative session. You know, to answer your question, kind of the short of the long story, we always are looking at ways how we serve our community better, how we can make the most impact, whether it's working through the departments and not the legislature and using our leverage. Well, you know, as the new administration up in Washington, D.C. came in, and there's been so much media attention to what's been going on there, we noticed that Hawaii is being left out. And so your folks' own stories where millions of dollars are cut to nonprofits here, nonprofits in our own community out in Hauula. We looked at, hey, how can we help? And I would like to, you know, get a pulse from the people. We have an opportunity with the next elections coming up in 2026 for a potential run at Congress. And so it's not something that I'm announcing, but we are looking at House District 2, that seat. And the reason being is the things that we're trying to do here, the things that we've been doing in our community, if we were to get that seat, we would be able to do that across the state of Hawaii. I mean, planting food trees, you know, on lands and feeding people and preventing outsiders from coming into Hawaii, preventing homeless from coming in, those kind of things we could address at the national level. And we do believe that with the chess pieces the way it is, with the president being Republican, with Congress being dominated by Republicans, our leadership, you know, it's no attack on any of them personally, but our leadership up in D.C. is all blue. They're all Democrats. And so why not go where we're wanted? I know the people might want us here in that Senate seat, and so I'm fine with that. But, you know, again, not an announcement. I had been, you know, prior to you guys bringing me on, I had been thinking of just putting it out to the people and just laying it all out there, telling them, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's what will be needed. Is there support? Is this something that you folks want me to do? You know, I'm walking through the grocery store, I got a lot of, hey, Brenton, you're going to run for governor. But, you know, sadly, there's not enough balance in the state to be anywhere near being able to do something like that. And, you know, I'm only 3 years in. But this congressional seat is something that we believe that we could make good change for the people here in the state.
And so that seat currently occupied by Representative Jill Tukuda. Your assessment of the work that she has done thus far, you know, do you think that she has delivered on some of the things? And then maybe what is some of the encouragement on your end to want to seek this role based on her performance and your perspective of it?
You know, again, this is not so much about Representative Tokuda case, whoever it may be up there. This is about what we think we can pass. When we came in, our number one goal, and I know even some Republicans in my own party, they're like, hey, stop with that already. They don't really like it. But we came in to represent local people, Hawaiians, you know, to start. And we believe going up there, we could pass bills. 24 other states have passed a bill to ban foreigners from buying ag lands. We want that in Hawaii. We tried to do that here. We passed it through the Senate, but the House, for political reasons, will never allow that to happen. We go up there, you know, we can potentially do that. in a session, in a second session. I've been in 3 years now. We've tried to push bills, but because we're on the wrong team when it comes to who runs the state, we don't get traction in the legislature at passing those bills. So, you know, I don't want to downplay what the representative up there has done. We just believe that it makes sense for us to be there if the people would want that. Again, I'll say that again. I'm in a good spot. I'm the minority leader. I'm the top ranking Republican in the state of Hawaii. I got another 3 years in this position. And this is something that, you know, I could stay in and be happy with and serve my community. But there have been calls from a lot of people when I go to Hilo, when I go to Kauai, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you come represent us too? So this would be an opportunity to at least ask them, ask the people, you know, if they're watching, hey, is this something that you guys want?
I'm interested to know that, you know, you famously in the last election did not raise any money. You made it sort of a campaign promise that you were just going to use shoe leather or rubber slippers or whatever your mode of transportation is to walk the district and get that face time with folks. This is a statewide campaign. Obviously, you can't walk the district in the same way. So how would you actually mount this campaign?
This is a much different race, but we would do it very similar. The only difference in this one, you know, the first time we did it for a fifth of the cost. I tried not to raise money to try to keep it out of it. The second time we proved that you don't have to raise money at all. We did it for zero. No donations was accepted. This time, and that's something that the people should know, these races are multi-million-dollar races. You have to raise $1 million+ bucks to be competitive. Linda Lingle, when the former governor ran, when her term finished, she lost 60-40 roughly, and she raised like $9 million bucks. So this is a David and Goliath race, and money would be a big factor. So that's part of the message in this. If people want, and they want change up there, and they want potentially all these grant monies to be coming back, there's gonna have to be skin put in this campaign. It's not something that, you know, we think should happen. I still don't believe that money should sway elections, but the landscape of this type of race means you have to raise money because, yeah, you're going statewide. You need, you know, media. You need to be on TV because it'll just be almost impossible to hit every door like we did the first time around.
You know, you mentioned in the top, one of the reasons why is because of the administration's control, as well as the control of the Capitol and the House and Senate by Republicans, and providing that voice. There have been some criticisms by those who are looking at what's happening in D.C. as that many of the minority voices are simply going along with what the administration is pushing and what the Trump agenda is. My question to you, what is your relationship with MAGA supporters, President Trump, his policies, and would you align yourself with some of the things that might seem controversial to some, but is become the platform of the Republican Party?
You know, I know like the viewers on the left who are watching this, they're gonna probably eat this up and throw it back at me. But I mean, if you talk to my staff, and they might be explaining the characteristics or qualities of the president. And there was one conversation where somebody was doing that with them, and they thought they were talking about me. So there is a lot of relation. He might be white and I'm Hawaiian, but there is a lot of relation into policies. You know, when they want to build a border and keep other countries from coming in, we want to build a border around Hawaii and keep outsiders from coming in. We've been preaching this since I got in. You know, so a lot of what they I don't want to go down every single detail and you know, trigger people with policies, but we do support a lot of what's happening.
How would you raise all that money? I mean, or would you rely solely on local donations? Would outside, I mean, PAC money? We did see in this race that there was some outside money in the last time Takuta ran against Patrick Bronco, and that was widely criticized. What's your thoughts on, you know, outside money coming in to try to influence?
You know, and I'll answer that, but I'll preface it again with, when we cut up this video after this show and it goes out to the public, I want to see the reaction. Because if they say, hey, you know, we just want you to stay in your Senate seat, you know, then all of this discussion is gone. But when it comes to money, we would also want to see how many people on our side, the conservative side, would want to donate. And we start here. But, you know, with advice from the former governor, you've got to go into other states and ask for those PACs to help. And so, if people want, we know that's work we're going to have to do to have the conversations to get all those big donors. It's not that we would turn it away, and I don't see it as selling out to other states. it's basically who ever can support us to get to that point. Um, it- Without going too deep into the woods, it has to happen. We have to raise that money. And I'm not, saying it can come from anywhere. We have standards. We don't even accept gifts. So we'll be very meticulous with who we accept from.
Well, we know that this, as you mentioned many times, that this is something that you're considering, that is not official, but you are putting it out there to people. What does this timeline look like? What is the response that you're going to need to see before you make a decision to ultimately make it official beyond just an inquiry at this point right now?
Yeah, good question. The reaction from people, when I did my opening day speech, that resonated across left and right to an extent. And you can kind of tell when people just continue to talk about certain things. So if we put this out and it falls flat, nobody's sharing it, nobody's talking about it, nobody's interested, maybe the temperature, it's not the right route. So it really comes down to the reaction of the people who see this message.
Okay. I want to move on to the legislative session, but before we do, just one last question on this. When you think about this, and I know that you are someone who, really goes on with your gut, that sort of drives you, just knowing you personally and professionally, I'm wondering what your gut is telling you about this. Like, does this feel like the right time for you to take this on?
Yes, and I thought a lot about that because I'm only 3 sessions in. So some people can say, hey, you're only your 3rd year in and you're thinking about taking this lead. We learn quick, and, who knows how long you get to be blessed with life on this earth. So I think we do know enough. I have strong belief in our team and what we've been able to do against the odds in this state. We've done things that senators have never done before in this legislature. I'm talking about within the community. And we feel strongly that the time is now. There's never going to be, now we can't say never, but we haven't seen for decades stars align like this. And just because stars align doesn't mean you win. It's still a David and Goliath fight. But if there was a time to put a name on the ballot and give people an opportunity for something else to represent them up in the East Coast in our nation's capital, this would be the time.
Well, let's take a look back at the legislative session. Your overall assessment on how you think things went. We spoke to Senate President Ron Kochi, who gave the grade of an I, an incomplete, saying work still needs to be done. Your overall assessment as the leader of the minority party within the Senate of how things went this session.
Hey, with respect to the president, that's a good one. That's a good grade to, not offend anybody. And you can ask him later on after we potentially come back into that special session later this year. But for us, it's very different take. And I don't want to be cynical, but on the conservative side, for Republicans, the minority caucus, when we're in there, if this was a basketball game, we're playing defense all the time. And so our stats are a lot different. We look to try to stop bills we don't like, and we judge our success based off of that. So, if you're looking at it from the outside, that's not a good position to be in. And so I never would want to tell you, hey, it was a good session, because if we're not passing bills, then what's the net gain? And so that's pretty much how every session has gone. Year 1, 2, and 3 has been a number of bills that we've seen. Look, we killed the movie industry. We found out that CRB, the coconut rhinoceros beetle, there's no solution for at least 10 years. We did nothing to stop homeless from coming in. It's very difficult to get homeless back out still. I can go down the list of things that we don't agree with if you want, but I don't want to be cynical again. We do feel like every year that we live in this imbalance in this state and the legislature gets to put out laws that, our independence, our freedoms as residents of this state continue to get taken away and made harder to live.
We are likely going into a special session. It's not a matter, I'm hearing, of if, but when. What do you think should be on the table? Those federal cuts are coming down the pike. We know that we are going to have to make some steep budget cuts. Where should the money come from?
The other day, Civil Beat did an article about food stamps, SNAP benefits, and that's got to be number one, because we got to make sure that everybody can eat. And we've been trying other ways to get ourselves more sustainable, but if they do cut those funds, we have the money. We had $700 million carryover. There was the lawsuit we'll get a little over $500 million out of. I know that's temporary, it doesn't continue to go on, but there's money right now, unless the forecast comes back bad from the Council on Revenues later this month. But from what we see, there's money. You have to have, Senator Dela Cruz in the chair if you want to ask for what to cut. But from our view, we see money, to fill in the void.
What would you say was the greatest accomplishment or something that you're proud of that was able to get accomplished this year? I know you talked a lot about defense and having to stop things, but was there anything that you were proud that you were able to push through this past session?
I mean, we had a couple bills. We passed, like I said, the ban foreigners from purchasing agriculture lands through the Senate, died in the House. We got a bill very simple bill that would recognize the coconut tree as a food source rather than a landscape item. We're injecting it with a lot of chemicals now to keep the CRB from eating it. We don't know what that chemicals does in the future if when the nuts grow back and people start eating them. Again, none of our bills passed. So when I look back and tell you, hey, what's our greatest accomplishments, they're what's coming up now. And so during session, we plan and prepare for after off season. And so one of the biggest things we got is there's a cesspool issue, one of the top 3, in our opinion, issues unsolved in this state with no solution, other than a solution that is unaffordable for 90% of people who have the problem. And we're gonna take the very popular Alawai Genki Ball project, we're gonna bring it to Kahalu, we're gonna clean up our waterway there. We've already started cleaning up, removing invasives from the beach there. We're gonna restore the whole area, and we're gonna test a pilot project to put this EM, it's called, the microbes that are in these Genki balls directly into cesspools. Cesspools in areas in Kahalu'u that we know overflow and spill into the waterway that continues to make that area one of the most polluted in the state. So we're looking forward to that, working with schools. I know, that's just the sexiest of topics, and it's not passing bills, but we're in the position where we have to work through departments to get things done, and this is our time where we get things done, is the off season.
I mean, if you're successful with that, that is tremendous, and that would have statewide impact because we know that so many homeowners are really facing this huge bill in making that conversion. So we will be following that. That's very interesting. I'm interested in sort of your strategy. It seems like you really do a lot of working around, right? So you don't get the fruit trees passed through the legislature, but you take your personal Senate budget and you use that to plant the trees.
Yeah,
like
very
how
creative.
Tell us about that creativity and how you're doing that.
Growing up in the country, it's the same way. Life's always been the same. They give you the lease and you got to make the most with it, and you got to do more with everybody else. And so that's been trained, and we know how to do that in our community. And till this day, it's the same as when coaches were coaching me. When we want to do a project, they're supporting the community to get it done. I mean, I'm not talking about millions of dollars worth of things, but we want to plant trees. Somehow we get trees. Somehow we get equipment. We want to bring back to life a beach park. Somehow we get equipment. We've had to use our minimal office budget that lawmakers typically will use to print flyers and send them in the mail and go on trips and whatnot. We've diverted those funds to make plants grow, essentially. But yeah, we do have to get very creative. We don't look at it as we're victims, though. We look at it as this makes us better. Because if we can produce, I mean, when I got in, there was a almost 20-year long water leak up in Mokulea, 1 million gallons a month, and no matter who was coming before, the thing kept leaking. Nobody stopped it. We got in our first year, we stopped the leak. And it was because we take those times of adversity or tests and we look at it like, hey, how can we do what others haven't done? And so we always look at it as a challenge, but we've been able to be successful even in a very unbalanced place against the odds.
I want to ask you about something that happened towards the end of the session that drew some criticism from members on the other side about your attendance during the conferencing session, time of the session when these bills are being debated on and ultimately ends up into being passed or not. Many of the Democratic senators may have criticized you for not being in attendance and not being there to vote on some of these bills. How do you respond to the criticism that you got over your attendance during this time of the legislative session?
I'll give you the long answer first. Just to explain it, because I know they're curious. They don't see it. I guess they don't see it. When I first got in my first session, we realized how many things were going wrong. You talk about good government, that's one real disappointing thing. We didn't pass one good government bill this past session. But when I first got in, we recognized a lot of waste of time things. And so conference, and the Democrats might be like, waste of time is the most important time. But what we realized was you get the last 2 weeks to be in conference, And what happens? I heard it from one of the other senators. They called it kabuki theater. It's you show up and you're going through the process like a robot to put a rubber stamp on a bill that you might not even vote on. We have, let's say, 10 days, and there'll be conference. You'll show up only to get sent back to your office because there's no clearance from finance or we can't vote yet. So those 5 days that lawmakers are doing basically nothing and saying they're in conference, we're working. In one case, they got upset because they made a video. It was kind of funny. Actually. They made a video because I went over to the Merry Monarch. It was a Thursday, I believe. Miss Aloha Hula, and I don't even regret it at all because it's the one night, and Ryan, I know you agree with this, it's the one night where the Hawaiian culture, out of 365 days in the year, is on, doesn't matter if you're left or right, it's about Hawaii. And so we went over there, and we watched that thing, and they made a little video. Oh, he's missing all his conferences. But that's why during that time, we ain't trying to rubber stamp and play the game with them.
I love your candor. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to just get a final thought from you on what you reflected on at the top of this possible CD2 race. What's your final message on that? How do you want folks to engage with you?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I was going to put out a video, but since we're doing it here, this will be the video. I want people to just know that, everybody who's saying, hey, Brenton, run for a higher office, run for governor, represent all of us across Hawaii, not just North Shore and the East Side. Hey, respond to this video. Let me know what you think. We think there's good opportunity to bring back a lot of money here and actually pass laws that can make a difference to making sure locals can stay in this state. If we go up to DC, I don't want to go up to there. I want to wake up 365 days right here in the best place on earth, but it's another sacrifice I'm willing to make. It's been all sacrifice. If they want it, let me know, because we'll do it. If not, less work for me.
All right. Senator Brenton Awa, thank you for being here today. Kim Coco Iwamoto will join us right after the break. You're watching Spotlight Now.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now. We continue on in our conversation, recapping the last legislative session. Again, we want to encourage those of you who are watching to enter your comments and questions for our guests throughout the show.
And we want to welcome in Representative Kim Coco Iwamoto. Thank you so much for being here. We had you on before session started, and so it's nice to sort of bookend that conversation with this one.
Yes.
What's your assessment? How was it?
Thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity. So I do want to acknowledge that you had on Speaker Nakamura and Senate President Kochi, and they shared a lot about their successes or the collective successes of the legislative process, and I echo a lot of those successes and partial successes. So I want my reflection to actually talk a little bit about where we failed or where we missed the mark, not to be cynical or negative, just to be honest with the public about what we could have done better, for instance. So, it was mentioned earlier in the segment that there were absolutely zero good government reform bills to stop corruption and pay-to-play politics. And that was that's very disheartening. We failed to tax and regulate cannabis. We failed to reform asset forfeiture. There were no substantive consumer protections for condo owners. While I do applaud what I know the chair of Consumer Protection and Commerce, Matayoshi, did for the condo association insurance, kind of like a plan B. That was really great. However, it just propped up the sale of condos because to making sure that they're fully insured, that they could be then bought and sold in commerce. However, it didn't really actually help the kapuna who are on retired income, who are trying to pay their mortgages and the increasing maintenance fees or assessments. We failed them. And we failed to pass safe staffing ratios for nurses. We know that was a really huge issue last year for nurses, and there was a lockout at Kapi'olani, and we didn't acknowledge that. We did not address paid family medical leave, which is ironic because I don't know if a lot of your viewers realize this, but as legislators, we have the ultimate paid family medical leave because we can actually just stay home and take care of our family member and still collect a paycheck. There's no attendance mandated for us to receive a paycheck. So we are beneficiaries of paid family medical leave, or at least that's one way to look at it. Shouldn't the people of Hawaii also have access to that safety net? We also, there was a bill to address the governor's ability to sign off on leases for the military or for corporations, and we failed to pass a mechanism that would have had a check and balance with the governor so that he would have to get certified that the applicant for the lease is in good standing with the state of Hawaii, which means that they don't owe any money to the state of Hawaii and that they are up to date on all their MOUs regarding if it's cleanup of a contaminated site. So we failed to pass that. We still give tax giveaways to REITs, which is real estate investment trusts, and that's, I feel, a failure. We did not fund physical notes. And this is surprising because I know it was on the radar for the former finance chair, Yamashita, since his early days in the legislature. He himself has advocated for physical notes. That's the white paper that's attached to a bill to say what the cost of the financial impacts of that bill will have on the state budget. And so even though he got into the position of finance chair, he did not fund those positions. And so that's an opportunity lost. And then obviously we just didn't do enough to raise revenue.
Wow, quite a list.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that is really a laundry list of things that you've just mentioned off there. And I wonder because when you look at it, you are a part of the majority party that is running a lot of what's happening, and there is a new speaker leading this charge. Do you think that it is a result of leadership? Why don't you think some of these things happened within a party that controls, the entire House and also the Senate?
Oh, I think more of us need to raise our voices and speak up for our constituents. I think there is a culture of, not standing out, going along to get along, not rocking the boat, not wanting to question. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I believe I wasn't allowed onto the Finance Committee. When I was here before session started, you asked me what committees I was, and I did think custom and practice is that all freshmen who want to serve on finance would have the opportunity to serve on finance. But as it turned out, I suspect because I was so outspoken of our tax policies in Hawaii, I took on the chair and the former chair and the former speaker of the House on their estate tax bill that would have given more money to heirs of the super wealthy heirs who inherited wealth in Hawaii. They wanted to make sure that they had more money and paid less taxes, and I took them on head on with that. I called out the tax cuts for the wealthiest families in Hawaii that they gave in those historic tax cuts. And so, because maybe I was so outspoken, it was made clear to me when I met with the former finance chair that he really wanted yes people on that committee, and again, this basically sends a clear message. Hey, don't raise your voice. Don't call out. Don't challenge. Don't try to improve the bill with your ideas. Or don't, so that's kind of what happens, I think, that it feels like the culture is groomed to not speak up and to reward those who stay silent and keep their nose to the grindstone.
I mean, you're describing a pretty toxic place. I'm curious to know if you think that things will be different now. Kyle Yamashita obviously has been removed from the position of finance chair. Chris Todd is the new finance chair. What are your thoughts about that change up and what will come of it?
Yes, well, I'm always optimistic. I always imagine people reaching and demonstrating their highest potential. When I first met Chris Todd, he introduced himself to me as the kind of Democrat who supported Bernie Sanders. And I'm like, wow, I can relate to that. Somebody who's going to challenge the corporatocracy, make sure the wealthiest families and the largest corporations are paying their fair share of taxes. That's what it was coded to me when he introduced himself that way. So I'm hoping he's going to deliver. I do know from just working with him, he's a part of leadership. And I find him to be very warm and accessible. And I think there have been mentions that he's going to be very collaborative. And I hope to see that. And I think that he has the potential to serve with humility, the kind of humility that invites collaboration, and to say that, hey, you know what? I don't know everything. I'm learning. We're going to learn together. So please raise your questions and concerns, and let's try to address them for the people.
When you have a body of 50 plus people trying to all come together and make decisions, obviously there are going to be differences in opinions and how things should be managed and cycled through. As someone who's maybe presenting different options and being critical of leadership and things that maybe you don't agree with, what steps have you maybe tried to take to find more commonality so that there is sort of a path forward, and maybe ways for you and those who maybe agree with you to break into more of the leadership side? Because while you may be part of the same party, it sounds like there is a divide within that. And how do you find that commonality and common ground in that?
Right. Thank you. Well, one important thing to note is that going into next session, there will be 29 representatives who have been there for less than 3 years or less. And there's only 51 representatives, so we represent a majority, and a lot of us are very hungry to see the changes. We don't want to sit around and wait our turn for the next 20 years to be a part of the change that we know our constituents need. So I feel like the fact that they gave Chris Todd this position was a reflection of that he's really been kind of cultivating relationships with a lot of the younger, newer representatives. And so I know a lot of us feel like that's important access point. Whenever I've challenged leadership, I've always done so in a constructive way. I always say, hey, I see this is happening, and I think it's that's not the right way to go. I think you might be violating the Constitution. You're definitely violating House rules. Can I suggest that you change? You comply and demonstrate that we comply with our rules and our laws, and I give them a path forward, and I try to say I want to be your cheerleader. I try to give, I try to be, productive and constructive. And when I am not received that way, I am not going to be silent. I feel like, it's like the Catholic Church. I'm not going to be silent as things are going on. I'm going to have to call it out publicly through the media, through social media. And I did definitely give everyone an opportunity to do the right thing.
Okay.
And I also want to make sure that there's always room for people to grow, right? To learn that, hey, maybe we can do better next time.
I'm interested, you mentioned the tax cuts, and we know that we are probably going into a special session. The federal cuts are vast, and our budget can't handle it in its current state. So do you think that lawmakers will have to roll some of those back, or where should that money come from? Or do we let some of those social services go away? I mean,
Absolutely not. No, I actually think operating our government through this lens of scarcity and austerity is absolutely wrong-minded. We did hear, I think, when you interviewed the Senate President and Speaker, that there was some kind of acknowledgement that maybe we'll need to roll back some of those historic tax cuts, especially for the wealthiest, maybe the wealthiest 20% of households. What we do know is that the Trump administration in its first term gave huge tax cuts, federal tax cuts to the wealthiest families and to the largest corporations. So they've been beneficiaries of these tax cuts for many years, and it's about time that we say, hey, you know what? It's time that the state have you remit your taxes directly to the state, right? So as the federal allocations are being turned off, we need to say, hey, all of you, the wealthiest families, you need to now start remitting those taxes that you saved for years directly to the state of Hawaii so we can feed are hungry. And we know, we have all the data, everyone agrees to the data. 1/3 of the households in Hawaii are food insecure. Families are living paycheck to paycheck. We have all that information. So what are we going to do about it, right? We can't just think we're going to build more affordable housing. We may need to offer state-funded Section 8 subsidies, especially if the federal government starts cutting off Section 8. They're threatening to cut off Medicaid. What are we going to do? So there are tons of tax revenue generating bills that I hope we consider during special session. And you heard the leadership acknowledge that there are 3 weeks that they blocked off in the fall. And I actually think instead of using just one of those weeks, we should use all 3 of those weeks that we set aside. I mean, we get paid quite well to show up for work, right? We get paid as much as teachers do, and teachers show up to work for 9 to 10 months of the year, and I think we could do the same with the same salary. So, there's a lot of work we need to do.
Well, when you talk about just beyond the tax revenues as an opportunity for the state to generate more money, is there any other things that you would advocate for as a way to help fill in some of the gaps? Is there any other ideas or measures that you would propose as a way for the state to find other sources of revenue?
Yes.
Noting that, we could see just these significant cuts coming from the federal level.
Right. So rolling back the income tax cuts that the wealthiest 20% received is one. I did submit a bill that would have raised revenue from basically investors who kept their properties, their homes empty, and collecting a GET surcharge. For instance, if these investors rented their home in the public to a local family, they would be remitting GET on the rental income. And then secondly, that family, when they go into their neighborhoods and buy a cup of coffee or go to the grocery store, get their car washed, they're paying GET. But if the families are moving to Vegas because they can't afford it here, we have 70,000 empty homes throughout the state. If we're collecting that GET surcharge, that would be a huge stream of revenue that we can count on. We need to make sure that we're raising the taxes on the wealthy through when their elders pass away and they leave them, more than $5 million or $11 million, we need to capture more of that in taxes. And in fact, coming into this legislative session, the finance chair announced that, hey, we have a surplus of $300 million because somebody very wealthy passed away and this was their tax liability. We need that tax liability. A lot of people, a lot of business owners who've generated wealth in our state did so because taxpayers invested in infrastructure, right? We educated their workforce. We paved the roads. We built the docks. So there's a lot of investment. We helped successful businesses in building their wealth.
Our time goes so quickly. I do want to ask you just to reflect on, you fought very hard for this seat. Now that you're there, what is it like for you? How has this been?
I'm really so appreciative that my district allowed me this opportunity. I try to honor that by speaking up whenever I can, whether it's in Majority Caucus or on the House floor, to send a clear message of how we could do better. And I just hope my colleagues understand that I do so out of a place of concern, not out of a place of disrespect for the work they're doing, but just knowing that we could do more, we can do better for the people of Hawaii.
3 sessions, 3 special sessions, that would be something.
3 weeks. 3 weeks, yeah.
Or you can think about them as one special session, just divided.
Yeah.
Over the course of 3 weeks. Well, we'll see if that idea takes float. Thank you so much for being here, Kim Coco
Thank you
Iwamoto.
so much
Good
for
to
having
talk
me.
to you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with Colin Moore right after this for his full analysis. You're watching Spotlight now.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now, and we want to bring in now our own political analyst, Colin Moore, to give us his take on how things and the news of the day, really, of what we just heard from our 2 guests. But let's start off with the announcement, well, not an official announcement, we should say, by Senator Brenton Awa about his potential run against Jill Takuda. Your thoughts and where you think he stacks up against Representative Takuda?
Sure. Well, this is a bit of a surprise. I mean, we're all just hearing this. I mean, for sure, this would be a very difficult race for him to win. I mean, the second congressional district is what we call a D+12 district, which is a big Democratic advantage. And for folks who don't quite know where our district boundaries are, CD1 is basically urban Oahu from Hawaii Kai to Kapolei. CD2, which is the district Senator Awa is talking about, is everything else, rural Oahu and all the neighbor islands. That is a Democratic district. Rep. Takuda won that with 61% of the vote recently, so you can see it's a pretty solidly Democratic district. At the same time, Senator Awa is a great campaigner. He doesn't campaign a traditional way. He doesn't tend to raise a lot of money, but he has a big social media presence. He's great door to door. That, of course, would be a little harder in a district of this size, and I expect he'll get a lot of support from national Republicans. And I can unpack a little bit, if you want, why I think the national Republicans would be interested in supporting this.
Yeah, and you heard there, I did ask him because he has made a big, part of his whole platform and part of his identity is I don't take any money. I don't take lay in my office. I won't even take your banana bread. Like, he's very strict on that. He doesn't accept any political donations in the last race, all shoe leather, rubber slippers, however he wants to characterize that. But he did say that he is open to going to other states and raising money if he has to.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, he knows it's not possible to run the kind of campaign he ran in his Senate district if he's going to run for Congress. So he'll have to accept some of those donations. You can't knock on every door in the 2nd Congressional District. But I don't think he's going to have any trouble raising that money. I mean, for national Republicans, there are a lot of advantages to running someone like Senator Awa, right? Running a credible candidate in a very blue state shows that they are taking seriously rebuilding the Republican brand here. Even if they don't win, it's an opportunity to recruit volunteers, to raise the profile of the party, and it's a shot across the bow of the National Democrats. Going after Rep. Takuda in a very blue district, I think would mean that national Democrats would have to use resources that they could send to other districts to defend a safe seat. So there's a lot of reasons national Republicans would want to support this run. For a candidate like Senator Awa, who's very charismatic, who connects with people, and I think has always been very careful about centering community issues. I think that one of the difficulties if he runs this race is to figure out how closely aligned he's going to be with these national Republicans, with President Trump, with the MAGA movement, because I think he's always tried to distance himself a little bit by emphasizing primarily what he's doing for the community.
We heard him talk a little bit about that and how he says, the president wants to build walls. I want to build a wall around Hawaii and not let insiders in there. He had some references to that and that alignment. But how much do you think that will become a part of this potential campaign, Takuda versus Awa, in that where, the alignment of Trump supporters and where maybe Democrats here locally view that, how that could be a hindrance to him trying to align himself too much with the president?
Oh, I think that this is going to be the biggest thing he will have to overcome if he runs this race. I mean, first, there's going to be a ton of scrutiny, that he hasn't had to face when you're just running in a Senate seat. This is going to be, national level political operatives trying to help the Takuda campaign. They're going to work to tie him to President Trump. President Trump isn't always so popular here in Hawaii. Where conservatives have done well here in the past tend to be in those nonpartisan races. But having that R next to your name makes it very, very difficult to win statewide office, and you're not going to get the support of the unions or the other major political movers in Hawaii that help people win seats. And so he's going to face tremendous scrutiny. And I think the effort for the Democrats, certainly from the Takuda campaign, I would certainly be shocked if they didn't do as much as they could to tie his candidacy to the policies of President Trump, which aren't always so popular here.
It's funny, though, when we were asking him about his relationship with the president, he said that someone had been describing the president and someone on his staff thought they were describing the senator. So he's not necessarily shying away from the personality part.
So I thought that was incredibly clever, and I think it shows what a talented politician Senator Awa is. I mean, one of the things that is refreshing about him is you feel like he's telling it to you straight. I mean, I think he has a tendency to vote against bills in the legislature that most people support, bills he doesn't think of as particularly necessary or serious. And I think that he is, and that is something that has always resonated with people about President Trump, that they feel like he is just speaking directly. He's not another politician. And so I think that if he's trying to kind of walk this very delicate line between not necessarily embracing all the policies of President Trump, but describing what it is people like about President Trump. I think that saying that their personalities are a little bit similar, that might be a very smart way to go.
How much do you think the local Democrats should be worried about this and just worried about the momentum that seemingly the Republican Party is gaining? I mean, we looked at some of the gains that happened in the last legislative session, the new members that were elected, some of the closer races that maybe weren't close in the past. And with a candidate like Senator Awa on the ticket in a statewide campaign, do you think that this is something that the Republican Party here locally can rally around?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that they will be receiving what they haven't had in recent elections, which is national attention and the money that comes with it. So that helps build the entire brand because you have professional political operatives, you have money to run ads, you have money to reshape what the Hawaii Republican Party means. Like I said, this has value for national Republicans because for them, they're able to say, look, we are running competitively in a diverse state, in a blue state. You know, the brand has appeal beyond just traditional Republican states, and it's an opportunity, I think, for the Republican Party, which, as you mentioned, has been gaining seats in recent years, to try to expand its coalition and become even more attractive to folks who are critical of the Hawaii Democratic Party. I think the trouble is that they're going to find is that for the most part, those Republicans who have won have really focused on very local issues. If they're being funded by the national brand, particularly the MAGA faction of that brand, I think they're going to have a hard time having it both ways. I mean, they're going to be forced into moments where they will have to say, do you support the policies of President Trump? Do you support the policies of a deeply conservative Republican Party? And they're going to have to give a pretty clear answer. And I think that could cost them some local voters.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned how well Congresswoman Chikuta did in the last race, but she was not up against someone as strong as Senator Awa. So I think there's definitely room to capture votes there.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't think most people could even remember the name of the gentleman. It was Steve Bond who ran against her as the Republican. So it would be a closer race no matter what. I mean, it would be a race that the Democrats and the Chikuta campaign would have to take seriously. I think she still has a huge advantage as an incumbent running in a Democratic state. I mean, someone who I think most people agree has been a pretty successful representative. And I think that's a critique that, you know, Senator Awa will probably have to develop a better answer to. You asked him, what is it that you would criticize about Congresswoman Chikuta? And he really didn't have an answer to that question. And I think that if he wants people to vote for him, he's going to have to give them a reason beyond just that he, you know, is also engaged in the community and wants to offer voters a choice.
I want to ask you about some of the comments that Representative Coco Iwamoto, Kim Coco Iwamoto made, and about just, you know, she listed a laundry list of things that she was not happy about with things that did not pass. You know, when you look at the Democratic Party here in Hawaii, especially in the House, controlled by this leadership, and, you know, you heard her say that there is a lot of fresh faces in there that are looking to kind of break off and do their own thing and take over the majority of that party. How do you view the dynamics that's happening within this party, specifically in the House, where there is now vocal opposition to some of the decisions that are being made?
Yeah, and we have a relatively new speaker who's trying to manage all of this, House Speaker Nadine Nakamura. I mean, I think that, you know, one thing I find so refreshing about Rep. Iwamoto and Senator Awa, for that matter, is that they are real straight shooters. I mean, you think of some people, they get elected into the ledge, and they begin to kind of toe the line a little bit. I mean, they're a little nervous about criticizing their colleagues. You don't hear that from Rep. Iwamoto. She was elected for a reason. She's happy to be an outsider. She's happy to offer criticism. I don't know how many of her colleagues, though, are quite as outspoken. I mean, I think that there is a group of progressives. She's right that there are a lot of new reps, although I think that some of them are trying to follow traditional pathways. I mean, traditionally, if you want to advance in the legislature, you wait your turn. And I think that's the dynamic you're beginning to see, is there's a lot of new people who are frustrated, who want to make change, and there are some folks who've been there for a while, and now it's their turn to lead. And I think trying to balance that dynamic is difficult. Now, I do think that the speaker hears that, and I want to mention that Rep. Iwamoto mentioned this, that the new House Finance Chair, Chris Todd, is part of that younger generation. He himself is personally relatively young, and it's somewhat unusual for such a senior leadership position to be given to a relatively new representative. So I think the speaker is hearing that, but she's also going to be hearing from folks who've been there for a while, who are more or less content with the way things operate and are a little bit nervous probably about this more articulate, a little more critical of progressive faction, that I think Rep. Iwamoto, as well as some others, are leading.
Well, you heard her say loud and clear, roll back those tax cuts in the special session that we expect to happen at
That's
some
right.
point, late summer, early fall. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think that that's where the money's going to come from?
I think it's very difficult to roll back tax cuts. I think, although I think that because most people haven't really felt those yet, because they've been rolled in relatively slowly, you might see them tinkering around the margins a little bit, particularly with the wealthiest folks here in Hawaii. That wouldn't surprise me. I think even, when those tax cuts were passed, as you might recall, a lot of people were shocked at just how aggressive they were. I think they expected them to be a little more moderate. So it wouldn't surprise me if they make some adjustments for the highest tax brackets. I think even, I think a lot of representatives would be open to that if we do face this potential crisis because of a loss of funding from the federal government. But I don't think they're going to roll them back all the way. And I think that, I expect that they'll revisit those.
I do just want to kind of also get, we don't only have a few more minutes, but just the reaction to the change in the finance chair position. There were a number of people on both sides who were upset about some of the things that happened and we did not eventually pass. And a lot of blame got placed on Representative Yamashita. What are your thoughts about that whole transition of power and how some of the things that maybe did not pass because of that may come up again in the special session?
Yeah, for Hawaii politics, this is one of the most dramatic things you can imagine happening. I mean, House Finance Chair is one of the most powerful positions in the state. I think this was the result of a combination of factors. You're right, there were many reps who were frustrated that their bills didn't go through, in part because they weren't given release at the end, which is this somewhat obscure parliamentary procedure that they need to move forward with bills. So I think they heard from a lot of nonprofits, from frustrated reps. I think that this was also the first big decision the speaker really had to make to put one of her people in charge of an important committee. And I think it also reflects what Rep. Iwamoto said, is that there was a lot of pressure from some of the newer legislators to put someone that they felt like was not necessarily on their team. I mean, it's hard to always characterize, who's on whose team in the legislature, but someone who they felt was a little more aligned with their policies. So I fully expect that some of the things that didn't go through could come back in the special session.
In session or out of session, Hawaii politics always exciting and always good to get your
Happy to be
analysis.
here.
Thank you for being here. We'll be right back after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, very interesting show that we had here today with, of course, an announcement from Senator Awa about his potential.
Dipping his toes in the political water, so to speak, looking at potentially taking on Representative Jill Takuda to run for CD2.
And you heard from him some of the reasoning why, and we heard the analyst from Colin Moore as well. So it will be a very interesting race over the next few weeks to see what eventually happens.
Yeah, and we'll be asking our next guest about that too. Senator Brian Schatz will be here next week, home in the district from D.C., get his thoughts on the federal cuts and what this all means for Hawaii. Also, Carl Bonham will join us live.
Yeah, it'll be interesting dynamic to hear what Senator Schatz has to say about some of the criticism that Brenton Awa and some of the reasoning why he may potentially enter the race. So we are looking forward to that conversation. Again, thank you for watching. You can always continue to add in your comments to the Facebook section and engage in the conversation.
Aloha.